The Finance Committee for the Town of Shrewsbury. My name is Mark Adler. I am your cruise director. First on the agenda is the consideration and acceptance of the minutes of our last meeting, January 20th, 2022. I hope you've all had a chance to peruse them and enjoy them in their glory.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Mr. Mizikar, do you have a report for us tonight?
I just wanted to let the committee know that we've updated the local receipts. They're in the drive, and I believe we handed out some documentation this evening on them. Continue to be pleased with the strength in the local receipts. We have issued motor vehicle excise tax commitment number 1, which is the main commitment. So not only am I asking you to watch your mailboxes, but also happy to report that it's about $200,000 greater than it was last year. So that's good. We shouldn't have a challenge in reaching our local receipts budget estimate for this year. If all things correlate to last year, we should exceed the overall budget with no issue sometime around the middle of the fourth quarter of the fiscal year. So we'll continue to update you every month throughout the budget process, but that's included in your documents for this evening.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from Mr. Mizikar from the Finance Committee? Okay.
So
Thank you very much.
You want me to just roll in the fiscal projection one then?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we've prepared a slide deck for you this evening. And I see that you all have picked up your budget books this year, and we're also really excited to have a better online format for our budget book this year. I got to give all the credit to Alex Martinez sitting here to my right. She is the creator of all the details in the budget book and the budget this year. I think it's an exceptional layout. It's much easier to read, and I hope it helps people engage and understand how we're going to spend every dollar, or plan to spend every dollar. And I just wanted to thank Alex for all her work on that. This evening, as we work through the overview of that budget, just remind the Finance Committee that we'll really get down into the details on all the line items when we work through your hearings later in the month of March. But it's my goal to kind of set the stage for you this evening and engage with you on the higher level aspects of total spending and the overview of the budget across all departments. So I'll talk a little bit about revenue updates from the revenue manual that we produced late last fall. We'll go through the general municipal budgets, the utility budgets, and I'll talk about staffing levels. We do have the school budget figure plugged in, and Dr. Sawyer will, of course, handle all the details associated with that through your budget hearing process. So with regards to total revenue, we have made some adjustments since the revenue manual was produced. We have adjusted state aid, which provided a net increase of total funding. This was based upon adjustments that were made in the unrestricted general government aid account. That was increased 2.7% when the governor produced his budget. We were holding that at about 1%. So that provided about $30,000+ of additional revenue. Given the strength of local receipts and where we finished fiscal year 21, we've increased the total amount of local receipts available in this year's budget from $11.665 to $11.965, so increased to $300,000. With regards to utility revenue, these are basically non-capital improvement, and these are operating costs associated with the utilities at this point, so we've balanced them out. There's likely will be changes as we look at the success of our projects this year and other available revenue and what our capital needs are moving a little bit closer to the final stages of the budget process in late April, so this number is likely to change. But is balanced right now, so it's not having an outsized effect on the overall operating budget. We're utilizing less free cash this year, but consistent with the previous report and the revenue manual. Other available funds is mostly funds that are attributed to debt service that come in from Selco. And reduction of levy funds includes free cash and then about $800,000 in revenue from Selco. So here's just a closer look at comparing across Fiscal Projection 1, the revenue manual, and the fiscal year 22 budget. In total, we are spending less than we did last fiscal year, or utilizing less, about $2 million less in funding. The biggest difference that I want to point to is in the other available funds, which was $4.4 million. That has an outsized effect of the appropriation of $2 million from the sale of Centec North that we appropriated for the reconstruction of the Toglin Hill Bridge. Otherwise, we'd pretty much have a level use of revenue year over year. Of course, it is nice to note within the taxation aspect of things that we have less debt service year over year, so we have to raise less funds because of that. But year over year, it's a pretty level amount. We are taking advantage of all the opportunities under Proposition 2.5, the full override that was passed in May of 2021. But again, it looks a little bit odd because of that special appropriation that we made at the fall town meeting. So a highest level overview of total expenditures, and this includes operating budget and non-operating budget aspects that we'll have town meeting consider. We have municipal expenses at just a little over $59 million, and this includes debt service and shared operating support categories. We have education expenses. Municipal and education expenses have been tied to the commitment to the community for the override. The next four budget expenditure categories include our utilities of solid waste, sewer, water, and stormwater. Then we have some non-appropriated items that we hold on the balance sheet, which includes offsets that are revenues that come in through the cherry sheet for specific, can only be used for specific purposes, whether that's school choice receiving tuition, aid to libraries, things like that. State and county charges for various reasons, various things we participate in, MBTA, mosquito control, and then our annual charge by CMRPC. We set aside $350,000 into the the overlay account. And the overlay account is to fund any abatements or exemptions that are due under the general laws that are sought through the assessor's department. The sale of cemetery lots is a traditional expenditure of $18,000. We fund through our books SMC and the Cable Public Access Fund. We receive that exact offsetting revenue from Selco. We're proposing a $2.5 million capital improvement plan, which we'll detail later. And then we have a variety of other warrant articles that we'll get to. The vast majority of the proposed expenditures and other warrant articles is a little over $3 million into the override stabilization fund.
Can I just hold you right there? I just want to see if anyone has any questions before we proceed deeper into the budget. On the previous pages, we're okay? Okay, thank you. Sorry to bother you.
Oh, no, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. So here's how the main categories are laid out within the operating budget. We are providing a year-over-year comparison and a comparison to what the department has requested and what is being funded that I'm proposing through Fiscal Projection 1. We're correlating those percent changes year over year to try to identify the core functions of government that are receiving different amounts, a different amount of money year over year. So administration and finance does in this include, I shouldn't say debt service, that's my error that I put in here, includes shared operating support, which is about $17 million of that line item. Shared operating support includes, the largest category includes funding for health benefits for municipal and education or school employees. It also includes our general insurance fund, which benefits both the town and the schools. Public safety, which is our largest dollar increase year over year in any functional category. Our retirement system, which is just a slight decrease year over year. As we know, we've fully satisfied our accrued liability. Happy to report that the preliminary returns on the calendar year 2021 pension system was over 18%, so another very strong year for that, which keeps us in a really good and stable funded position, over 100% likely once we go through the actuarial analysis. Department of Public Works, Community Development, Human Services. The educational funding is at 4 3/4% in accordance with the commitment to the community. And then, as I noted earlier, we do get the benefit of a reduction in debt service. The total expenditures will be almost 22% less than they were last year. There won't be an exact correlating reduction in the requirement from the tax levy. The largest change in debt service payments is associated with not having to fund requirements for the Shrewsbury High School any longer. But roughly 2.3 of the $2.6 million that we're funding that debt service came in from the School Building Authority. So we do enjoy a $300,000 tax levy reduction, but the vast majority was being funded from the state. So through general operations, town and school, we're proposing a budget of $138,433,515. It's roughly a 1.68% year-over-year increase in spending.
Excuse me, Mr. Mizikar, on the previous page, on the pie chart, we were laying them out as a 164 million. Can we just discuss the discrepancy,
Absolutely.
the difference in those numbers?
Yep, so I'll go back to that prior slide.
Thank you.
So the $138 million that is reported on the next slide is seen in the first two lines in the municipal expenses and education expenses. And then the balance between the 138 and 164 are all those non-general fund operating and miscellaneous expenses that are listed in the remaining line items below that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, working with the Board of Selectmen as we constructed the budget, we sought to achieve progress in 4 areas and goals that were set by the budget: build and maintain a reliable infrastructure, promote economic growth, improve the quality of life, and maintain an effective local government. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the high-level changes that we're proposing in the budget within those 4 categories, and I've grouped them together on 2 slides. The first one includes investments in infrastructure and quality of life for fiscal year 23. This fiscal projection one proposes the addition of an Assistant Department of Public Works Director that would be responsible for energy management and climate resiliency initiatives. We're looking to enhance the solid waste collection program, including expanded services in the yard waste area, given challenges that we've faced in recent years. It establishes the town's first formal tree planting program to replace trees that we either have to remove for various safety measures or that are damaged through weather events. It increases staffing within the police department, which I'll detail out in a little bit. Continues the long-range staffing plan for the fire department by increasing 4 additional slots in the rank of lieutenant and fully funds the 2018 SAFER grant positions. There's not an overall increase in total firefighters. It just rather changes the mix of lieutenants to firefighters to ensure we have adequate supervision at all stations for all shifts. Recognizes the responsibilities reorganizes responsibilities and creates a standalone recreation department. So we're pulling recreation out of the Department of Public Works and allowing it to be a standalone department. This was an initiative that was identified as a challenge that we faced during reduced revenues in the early part of the pandemic. And further, we're just not functioning at a high enough level for recreation activities, and creating a standalone department will allow them to be free from just unrelated challenges they face at being Department of Public Works, and hopefully enhance services to residents. And we'll be adding capacity in the water and sewer divisions, including environmental regulatory and safety coordinator to manage water quality, source protection, water conservation, emergency response, and customer outreach. So we're really pleased with the progress that's been made, especially in our water quality area. We've added resources over the last few years, and this really moves us towards the end of establishing what we believe is the long-term or more stable department division for managing our water supply. And this position that's proposed that we've highlighted here is a result of feedback both from DEP and our annual water quality report, and in response to what we think is important to maintain a high-quality water supply for our residents. So in the second two categories of economic growth and effective government, it fully funds the second assistant town planner that was partially funded in the fiscal year 22 budget. It provides sufficient funding to open the new police station, which will come online somewhere around December or January of this fiscal year. It staffs and manages enhanced voting opportunities for state and federal elections. It's a significant cost driver as we prepare for heightened part of our election cycle, which we do every 2 years, but adding additional opportunities requires more resources at the local level. It fully establishes a human resources department for the town, and it establishes a standalone fleet maintenance division, untangling it from the highway division within the Department of Public Works.
Will this person, the fleet maintenance division, or people, be handling vehicles across the municipal side, including fire and police?
Not fire yet, but it will include police. So it's only a half FTE increase year over year, but it creates its first standalone budget for fleet maintenance activities, and we'll continue to work on the development of this division over the 12-month fiscal year. Ultimately, it is my goal to have fire apparatus serviced in-house. We need to have our technicians, emergency vehicle, EVT, emergency vehicle technicians certified before we can do that.
Thank you.
Sure. So spend a little bit of time in each category, again, just at the high level. So administration and finance is a total increase of a little over $1 million. You can see that operating support is the driving cost behind that, with over $800,000 of that $1.1 million needed for increases in health insurance of employees. That line item is roughly $13,750,000 for fiscal year 23, an $800,000 year-over-year increase. I noted elections and registrations. I do just want to touch on the town manager reduction, and that is mainly attributable to the creation of the Human Resources Department. The difference between the $134,000 reduction there and the $215,000 reduction is primarily attributable to the full funding of the Human Resources Coordinator position, which is only partially funded in fiscal year 22. Okay, if I go on.
Please.
Operating support here is broken out in a little bit more detail. I already noted the group health and life insurance. The group health and life insurance, the Medicare line item, unemployment compensation, and the general insurance are all line items that are have shared expenses between municipal and educational sides of our operations. So they're tracked through that shared operating support cap, which is about 6.1% year over year in the commitment to the community. Inflation, of course, is a major factor that we're seeing across a lot of department requests, and we discussed that with department heads during the budget review meetings. So this gas and oil line item is a clear indicator of that. I know everyone feels it at the pump. And we're certainly going to experience a need for a cost increase. We go out to bid with the city of Worcester for all of our gasoline and diesel fuel, so we leverage Worcester's buying power and volume when we source our gasoline and diesel fuel, so we get that benefit, but still we're seeing a significant increase given the price of gasoline and fuel, just like everyone else.
Are any of these items on the operating support handled also for Selco? Is there a sharing with any of this?
Selco's expenses have been carved out of all these. We leverage buying power with them on general insurance. On gasoline and oil, they provide funds back over to us, but we net that out when we budget for it on our side.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, if I may.
Go ahead.
Kevin, the information and technology increase, is that also related to inflation?
Information technology, no, it's not related to inflation. It's related to really expanded services. It fully funds a partially funded position this year, and it adds on additional costs associated with some of our software systems. The primary driver behind that is we've added a new customer self-service tool within the treasurer collector's office, and we are also carrying additional costs. Some are inflation related, but a lot of it is attributable to some new software packages that we've acquired.
Thank you.
Kevin?
Yep.
On these software packages, I know we leverage some of our buying power with City of Worcester. Are
Yep.
there towns that use the same packages that we leverage with, or are we able to?
Not that I'm aware of. I think it's module by module and user based. So I don't really think there's an opportunity to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So keep moving through a couple of the other areas. So the police department, which we've talked about, we're proposing three additional officers within this budget. We're currently in negotiations with the patrolmen's unions and the police superior officers. So that will impact the total bottom line for the police department, but we're carrying funds hopefully sufficient to meet the outcomes of collective bargaining negotiations. The fire department, as a department, has the largest dollar for dollar increase. There are no additional firefighters, but we're working our way through the impacts of those 4 additional firefighters and the associated changes that we made through the collective bargaining agreement when we established lieutenants for the first time in fiscal year 2019. It's just a little bit more costly year over year because we have all captains and all lieutenants working their way through steps within those wage scales. So we are seeing some increased costs even though we're maintaining the same level of total fire personnel. Retirement, we mentioned some reductions. We're just balancing out and setting ourselves on the path that we will be on for several years in the future with regards to the total funding level, and we'll be swinging dollars back and forth between OPEB and pension as the pension system needs it. In general, on pensions, we're roughly funding it 2 times the normal cost to continue our conservative approach, but that will decline year over year, and those funds will become available for OPEB and other purposes.
Yeah, Dennis?
On the fire department increases, should we be expecting roughly a $350,000 a year? You said part of it's going through the steps, and I assume if you're starting with lieutenants, they're all at the lowest step to start and moving through. So this is something we'd be seeing every year?
No, we'll see another, I think, outsized, for lack of a better word, increase in fiscal year 24, but then they move through their steps on an annual basis, and there's 4 steps, so we'll be satisfying those and get into a more steady state.
Okay.
Okay.
Within the Department of Public Works, we mentioned some employees that we're adding in the highlights section. Those are kind of detailed out. The half FTE in public buildings is a half year for a custodian position at the new police station. Currently, we provide custodial services for the town hall, the senior center, and the police station with 1 full-time custodian and contracted staff. So we plan to have the town hall custodian focus on the town hall and the senior center, and will reduce contracted staff that is associated with the police station right now, and add in one full-time employee effective halfway through the year. So we touched upon a number of the other positions. It includes the assistant DPW director, fleet maintenance, and we are adding a dedicated program manager to the cemetery department. The impact on cemeteries is not well seen here because we have allocated some costs into a new budget area, which I'll flip to here in a second, called Parks Maintenance. As we break apart Parks and Recreation, we wanted to separate the costs associated with activities and programs and the costs associated with maintaining the physical infrastructure of the parks. So some of the cemetery costs have been moved there as well. So the next budget category is community development. Modest increases year over year. The changes in planning and economic development are a result of funding, fully funding the second assistant town planner position. It was only partially funded in fiscal year 22. We've also changed how we use revenues. So the planning board charges fees for applications and inspections associated with projects that they approve. And historically, we've utilized those fees within the Planning and Economic Development Department to fund salaries. However, those inspections that we collect fees for are actually performed through the engineering division. So we are shifting that revenue source to cover one of our inspector positions in engineering, and allowing the tax levy to fully fund the Planning and Economic Development Department. So no other real notable changes in there, just normal increases in operating costs. Within the human services area, these particular departments, I had previously mentioned the establishment of a parks maintenance department. So this will include the maintenance activities associated with our parks and recreation facilities. You'll notice a sizable decrease within Parks and Recreation as we move those infrastructure maintenance costs out and place them in Parks Maintenance. We also pulled in some funds, as I noted before, from cemetery, and also from other aspects of the Department of Public Works. Veteran Services is a reduction really based upon the demand for and eligibility for veterans benefits. So as the demand has declined over recent years, there is no longer a need for funding. We are reimbursed 75% of all the Chapter 115 benefits that are provided to veterans from the state each year. So we've also seen a reduction in that. So it's most prudent to only budget for what we really need. So as those benefits are reduced, or there's less folks eligible or taking them, we're just reducing the budget in kind. And then finally, debt service. As I noted, we are no longer have to fund the debt service on the high school. We're also still benefiting from the refinancing of the Sherwood Middle School that we did last April. So taking advantage of all those benefits, the total debt service budget will be reduced by about $3.5 million. So that's the general fund operating budget. I can stop there to see if there's any questions about that high-level overview, and if not, or when we're all done with that, I'll move into the utilities.
Hannah?
I just have a question on the debt service. So the police station, is that coming on in this next fiscal year? Is that part of this?
It is part of this, yes.
Okay.
Yep, it's in these, it is in these numbers.
Right.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
So with, in the utilities, these are all funded entirely by rates, with the exception of solid waste. Solid waste is funded partially through the tax levy and partially through rates that we collect for the sale of bags. We are proposing a solid waste manager for the first time to help improve the quality of the program and provide direct oversight. We obviously touch the vast majority of residents through this program, and we feel there are plenty of opportunities to both secure more grants and achieve better service levels for our residents in partnership with our vendor. We'll be nearing the end of our current contract requirement and moving into another procurement period, which will take a lot of effort. So, but we are excited about the opportunities that having a dedicated staff member related to solid waste will bring to the town. And this budget, as I noted before, also provides the opportunity to have more yard waste disposal options for residents. So whether that's drop-off locations and opportunities, and additional weeks throughout the spring and summer months to better service residents. Stormwater, we are proposing the increase of 1 additional dedicated staff as our activities related to our permit through the federal government increases. This has been planned throughout. We set an initial 5-year revenue rate setting period 3 years ago, so we're just executing that plan at this point. I noted before, just generally speaking, these numbers are likely lower than we'll ultimately see when we get to town meeting, because we're not fully funding capital, as we haven't built those plans out in their entirety yet. So I would see either equal funding levels to the fiscal year 22 budget or slightly greater once we make it to town meeting, and we'll update the committee as frequently as we need to throughout the course of the budget process. I noted the 3 positions within water earlier, and we're also increasing 1 FTE within the sewer department to be able to manage our responsibilities there. So that is the end of the operating overview for fiscal year 23, and I'd like to move on to the capital improvement plan, unless there's any other questions before we do that.
No, thank you. We can move on.
Great. So the capital improvement plan this year is a little bit different than years past, as we have the opportunity to be able to fund additional dollars and use tax levy. So over the years, we've been building up the amount of tax levy that we contribute to the annual capital improvement plan. This year, we have the opportunity, because of our revenue growing faster than we had anticipated when we put the formulas together last spring, but still staying within those funding caps within our operating budget. It provides a little additional tax levy to be available for one-time expenses within this capital improvement plan. So we're proposing the use of $1.6 million in free cash and a little over $800,000 in tax levy to fund these projects that you see listed here. The largest project that we're proposing to fund is $950,000 for the Oak Middle School window project. We put $50,000 in place to begin the feasibility study for this project. Ultimately, in the end, the MSBA will reimburse us for a little over 50% of the cost of this project, but we are required to appropriate the full amount and demonstrate that to MSBA that we can carry the entire cost. So we're moving through the feasibility study. We have an OPM on board and building a contract with the architect. I don't envision this project actually getting underway until potentially the summer of 2023, but since we're committed to this project, we want to get it funded and not lose the opportunity to do so. The second largest increase, and my final note on the capital plan this evening, is the replacement of our computer-aided dispatch and records management software system for the police department. It's a $433,000 initial upfront investment for the purchase of the system, implementation, and configuration thereof. Annual operating costs are found within the police department's budget, but this is the first time we've replaced this software system, and I believe over 20 years within the police department. We've used a software system called PAMIT for that period of time. So this is a major investment. It's a much advanced system and will allow us to better report data and information out to residents and maintain better information internally within the department, but it's a significant investment, and I just wanted to note that at this time. So I've also noted for the first time at the bottom of this plan the types of vehicles that we're purchasing as the town begins to transition its fleet as quickly as possible into alternatives to internal combustion engines, including hybrid vehicles and full electric vehicles. So I noted that for the benefit of the committee and residents and other viewers. So happy to answer any other questions on the capital improvement plan and operating budget if there are any.
Anna?
I just, on the side note where you indicate the total funding requested by department, I'm just curious, what was the 4.3 million that the cemetery requested?
Yeah, so that's the construction of the entire first phase of the Prospect Park aspect of the cemetery.
Okay.
We still have a little bit of work to do in planning and development of that. It is a real cost estimate at this point that we're gonna have to talk about how we fund. I don't think we could probably swallow all the funding at 1 year. It would likely require the use of their trust fund and likely some debt service. That would get us, our estimate is about 20 to 25 years of space on the Prospect side of.
And when does that pay itself back, or does it? Like,
That's a good question. I was gonna say I don't know that it ever does, but I'd have to look into that on the number of lots that would be associated and what the price is if it does pay itself back.
thank you.
And when is the actual start of that gonna be? Are we talking?
Well, we are nearing complete build out. I don't know if that's the right term. Complete sale of all the spaces at the current site of Mountain View. We're within a 3 to 5 year window. We are very limited in the sales of lots. They're basically immediate need, death. If you don't have a lot, we allow someone to buy, but we don't allow anyone to prospectively buy. We changed that about 3 years ago, just given the few lots that we have left. So we would have to further constrict that if we wait more than 3 years. There may be an opportunity if we would delay beyond that, there would be a period of time where we wouldn't have any opportunity to sell lots to residents.
And just a follow-up?
Yeah.
On the 25 years that we're talking about, possible, is that taking into account the pretty rapid growth the town has had in the last 5 or 10 years?
It does. It's a current study that we started within the last 20 months, 24 months. We put funding in place through a previous capital improvement plan to study and develop a plan for Prospect Park for that side. But it does.
Alan, you had a question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the electric vehicle. Are you all gonna be installing a charging station for that also, and is that included in this?
The charging station is not, but we are installing charging stations. So Selco is funding that. They secured a grant for 2 charging stations here at the town hall. They will be publicly available as well. And the new police station has, I believe, 4 dual charging stations, so 8 chargers will be there for the town fleet. And then Selco's also putting 2 more charging stations at the Shrewsbury Public Library. With these vehicles, since they are work vehicles, they wouldn't be taken home. They would be able to charge for up to 14 hours a day, just because they're only used for about 8 hours a day. So a normal wall charger would also be sufficient if they're kind of duty stationed out of the highway garage until we would get faster chargers for them.
So you'll have a few fast chargers also?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the capital? Carlos?
Yes, under the Police Department, the TASER bundle.
Yes.
I noticed in our book, it says Y1 of 3, but here it says Y1 of 2.
Yes, it should be 3,
It should be 3.
yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else on this? All right, thank you very much for your presentation of on Fiscal Projection 1 and the overview of the budget. Obviously, we'll be getting more into it in detail as we approach our budget hearings.
Yeah.
And if anyone watching tonight wants to be more involved, ask questions directly, I urge the public to come to our budget hearings, which we will be scheduling. Right now, it's tentatively scheduled for the end of March, March 24th and 26th. These are open to the public, as are all of our meetings for viewing, and we would really love to see people get involved and learn more about it. All right, without further ado, let's move into our workshop. We're having, our monthly workshop is going to be an overview of utility and enterprise funds. It's just a more casual way of discussing an overview of our topics that we are involved in as a finance committee, and sometimes it's nice just to review that we learn about how these work, ask bigger questions, and not worry necessarily about this year's budget or next year's budget, but just talk about the process and how these funds work. Mr. Mizikar.
Thank you. We appreciate this opportunity. So on the screen here, I just provided a kind of a very high-level overview about how all of our various funds work. You heard me several times this evening talk about the general fund, and that's where most of our operations lie. It's where all tax levy funded things are expended from, and all of our funds are maintained. The vast majority of all of our governmental expending occurs through the general fund, and as I noted, at least $140 million of the total $160 million flows through the general fund. When we move into more proprietary funds, more special purpose funds, is where we find our utilities. Our utilities that we currently have on hand are water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste. And these funds are known in Massachusetts as enterprise funds, and they are ideally built to be self-sufficient, meaning that we have a rate, we charge a fee for a service, and those fees cover the operating costs, both direct and indirect, of these various lines of business. So we obviously sell water, we sell wastewater services, manage stormwater requirements for the town, and provide solid waste services. And we collect fees, and in most cases, with the exception of solid waste, which was designed not to, all these other fund areas are sufficient in and of themselves, where revenues cover all operating and capital expenditures on an annual basis. So we're going to mainly talk about those funds. I just went through kind of an overview of this, but this is a little bit more detail that's found in the general laws. They're found under Section 53F and a half of Chapter 44, which is the main financial section of the general laws. It provides these 6 requirements associated with enterprise funds, and it lays it out what you can use when you can establish an enterprise funds, how those funds can be expended, and how you balance those accounts. So one of our most recent funds is our Water Enterprise Fund. Prior to fiscal year 20, water funds came in as a local receipt. So you would have seen that on the local receipts report. They weren't specifically set aside and only eligible to be used for water services and associated activities. But in order, in my opinion, to provide transparency and actually ensure that those water rates that we raised for those particular purposes were available for the benefit of the water system, were properly held. We established the enterprise account, of course, was, I believe, unanimously supported by the sitting finance committee at the time. It also took away some complexities and items that we'd have to explain at every fall town meeting, where we transfer any excess revenues that came in from water fees over what we budgeted and would go into free cash, and then we'd have to transfer them out of free cash. So this is just a much cleaner and safer way of managing our responsibilities for water services through an enterprise funds. The Board of Selectmen serves as the water commissioners, and they're responsible for setting rates associated with this enterprise fund. So Shrewsbury was an early leader in the area of special funds, and we proposed our own special legislation in 1955, creating a special fund to manage our sewer revenues and expenses. We were an earlier adopter of this type of fund where we raised rates specifically for this purpose, and at that time there was no general law that provided for this, so we had special legislation passed on our behalf. It makes it a little bit different from the other Chapter 44 funds. The biggest difference is that we actually have to have all the funds on hand prior to town meeting that we're going to appropriate. So for water, we're able to project total revenues in any given year, but for sewer, we actually have to have those funds on hand the day that we vote them. So that's the main distinction that you'll see among these, between this and the general enterprise funds, but it's something we've been able to manage. It was set up properly in the beginning, and it hasn't been an issue really year over year as we maintained these fees. They're set by the Sewer Commission. We tie them to water consumption because we don't meter sewerage, so it's tied to the amount of water going in, not what goes out. But it's normally very well correlated if anyone wants to study it. And we do fully cover the cost of both operating and capital and indirect expenses associated with our sewer operations.
Mr. Mizikar, does this mean the way that sewer is a little different than the others, just because of its historic nature? Does that mean that the sewer funds are raised in anticipation of, that is, you know, the way you say,
Yeah.
they all have to be there by town meeting, so you're all really spending last year's money effectively?
Yes, that is true.
Okay, whereas water, you say you could project it.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And if I remember, so I've been on this long enough, the water funds were technically considered part of the tax levy, tax revenue.
Yep.
And there was no requirement that the town actually separate those funds. They could have spent actual tax dollars on water and raised and brought the rates at left rates lower, but instead, on principle, the town kept it at a one for one. But now that it's an enterprise fund, that sets it up as in a stricter measure.
It does.
Okay.
And it's, just to be clear, it's more strict than the other way. So you could still use tax levy to fund enterprise operations. You just can't do the opposite.
You can't take enterprise funds to fund general
Correct.
expenditures.
Correct.
Okay. And when we have department heads who handle more than one project,
Yep.
like DPW and such, then that woman or man's salary is divided.
Yeah, it's
Appropriately.
offset, and at the end here, I plan to bring up some of our balance sheets and kind of show a comparison
Okay.
of how we do that for those indirect costs. But yes, we do manage general administration and overhead costs with rates from the utilities. They're called indirect costs, and we're allowed to do that.
And Kevin, is the Sewer Commission also the Board of Selectmen?
No, the sewer commission is 3 individuals appointed by the town manager.
I see.
So why do we do that differently? Have a sewer commission that's separate appointed, whereas the selectmen sit as the water commissioners?
That's a really good question. It's just the historic nature. So in municipalities across the state, historically, the selectmen held every power unless it was delegated to someone else. So, early 1900s, normally a 3-member board of selectmen held all executive power, and then as cities and towns grew, and the general laws became more mature, they identified these different operating groups or commissions for specialized areas. Shrewsbury never established a separate water commission to handle those activities, so it's just remained with the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right.
So the Stormwater Enterprise Fund was also established in fiscal year 20, and it actually referred back to a stormwater bylaw, management bylaw that was passed in May of 2007. That granted authority under the Board of Sewer Commissioners to implement and enforce a stormwater utility, but we established a financial mechanism for that in fiscal year 20. These costs are associated with the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yes. Who permits the town and the use of any water, stormwater, that we collect and enters our stormwater system. So if it enters our drains, enters our culverts, and it runs off of properties, and we're responsible for the quality of that water and any place that it discharges from our system. So we take ownership of that, and the EPA regulates us underneath our MS4 or stormwater permit. So we assess a fee in order to be able to manage those services. It is a growing cost. It affects everyone's, ultimately, water quality, as all of our stormwater runoff enters rivers and lakes, and ultimately, as everyone knows, makes its way back into the drinking water system. So maintaining that water quality will be an ongoing cost driver for the town in the future. And our largest or most expensive area that we're experiencing through our permit will be the removal of phosphorus from our stormwater, from the water. So it's a lot to do with fertilizers and other man-made chemicals, but we are required to document those phosphorus levels at all of our discharge points and comply under EPA standards.
So do we have a purification system that does all that?
Not yet. It's likely that we will have to, as they call, mechanically remove the phosphorus at certain points. That would be after year 5 of our permit, but we're monitoring levels over these first 5 years, and we are putting special requirements on large-scale developments for them to remove phosphorus closer to the source. So, these new major Edgemere and, the Point at Hills Farm, like those developments will all have to treat phosphorus at the source. Yep.
So, are we going to be anticipating then a capital expenditure to our own?
Very likely, but what we did in this first 5-year plan is we built in sufficient funds each year to build a capital fund that should hopefully offset most, if not all, of any mechanical phosphorus removal that we have to do.
Is the stormwater enterprise, as this new creation, is it sufficiently covering all of the costs?
It is, yes. It is actually performing rather close to what we expected. We're raising the amount of revenue that we anticipated, and right now, really, to be honest, we're building more funds into that future capital improvement fund than we are expending on an annual basis, and that's going to change over time because our permit, the requirements of our permit get stricter and stricter as we move through the first 5 years.
Thank you.
Yep.
And now everyone's favorite topic, the solid waste fund.
Yeah, solid waste. So this is our second oldest enterprise-like fund. Solid Waste Enterprise Fund was established in fiscal year 2009 to implement or to manage our solid waste curbside collections. We used a pay-as-you-throw model where customers, residents buy pay-as-you-throw bags. And those are the only bags that we picked up curbside, and the bags were sized and priced based upon the weight that they would hold, and it gives us a very accurate way to specifically charge for the level of service, that is the disposal of the trash that you place in the bag, based upon the tipping fees that we're charged when we deposit them at the waste incinerator at Millbury. It's roughly 50-50, funded through the tax levy and through the revenues that we receive from the sale of bags and bulky waste stickers. We also receive other miscellaneous fees like the sale of recycling bins that are optional to residents. But, you know, that was the intention of the program, so roughly split the bag fees cover the cost of the actual tipping fees at the incinerator, and the tax levy covers the equivalent of the service contract of the hauler picking them up at the curb, or vice versa, because it's a 50-50 split. So.
Mr. Mizikar, when lawn clippings and brush and Christmas trees and such are picked up, are they funded through this fund, or are they funded separately?
I'm sorry?
When lawn clippings, brush, and Christmas trees and such are collected, is that paid for through this fund, or is that separate?
The collection of it is paid for through this fund. We take those materials to the landfill. They're used as decomposed and used as cover, so we're not really charged to tip those.
I see. So it's, in some ways it's to our benefit, in some ways it's a neutral.
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
I think herein lies the end of this presentation.
So,
Oh.
yeah, I wanted to work through some of,
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. Alex will try to get the screen back up, but I did want to show kind of how the direct and indirect costs work. Back to Mark's question, I'll put some spreadsheets up. Hopefully we can get the screen back up, but yeah, happy to.
No, I just taking an example of the water enterprise front. So the revenue coming in is usage paid by the residents, right?
Correct, yep.
What are the expenses going out, and, I mean, what part are in the fund and what part
Sure.
are outside the fund?
Yep, so with regards to water, on the operating side, we have employees who are responsible for field activities, maintenance of mains, repair of mains, valve maintenance and repair, and we're moving towards in-house unidirectional annual flushing. On the non-personnel cost drivers is the operation of our water treatment plant that is located just off of Main Street down by the intersection of the high school. That was constructed and brought online in 2018. So we spend a lot of money in chemicals and the management of that system as well. And then the rate also covers annual capital improvement plan. We try to replace or invest about $1 million in main improvements each and every year. That puts us on a cycle where mains last between 75 and 100 years. So that is a reasonable life cycle in that utility. They're cement-based materials, or we're using ductile iron now. So those are the main categories that we expend water funds on.
Anyone else? Okay.
I had one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, do we do most of the water repairs on our own, or do we hire outside?
We right now, so the repair side, when there's a break, we do 100% in-house.
Okay.
Main replacements, we bid out, and contractors do that
Okay.
work for us. Yep. Okay. So, just waiting for the screens to kind of reboot here. We're having some connection issues.
Yeah, they're back.
We're back? Okay. So what I wanted to do is just, as best I can, show how the utilities influence the balance sheet. So simplistically, when we build the budget, everything flows through our master balance sheet. We have revenue at the top, expenditures at the bottom, And you'll notice here on lines 11 through 14 is where we identify the revenue, lines 12 through 15 is where we identify the revenue that's going to be raised outside of the tax levy through our utilities. So you'll see within the solid waste utility, we're anticipating $1.3 million. And just through the beauty of Sheets formulas, it identifies back to solid waste G10. So this is our solid waste balance sheet that we utilize that I'll bounce back and forth from. So here's that equivalent in G10 here where we
Not sure that's showing on the screen.
Oh, it's not showing on the screen. How's that possible?
Oh, oh, there it is. Oh, now it's gone.
It just,
When's that IT expenditure coming in?
Yeah, who knows? Okay, so
I would not fault you if you wanted to stand up and point. That's really totally
Yeah.
fine. I'm not judging you
you
there.
want me to do that?
That might just be easier. And also the audience at home might,
Okay.
the millions of people watching this coast to coast.
Yeah, so we identify the various sources.
Thank you.
So Caitlin doesn't yell at me. The various sources of revenue, how we bring them in from the various sources for the solid waste program. So we grab this $1.3 million, and then Alex, if you go back to the master balance sheet, if you don't mind, we just carry that over here. So we're identifying the revenue that comes in from that utility. Alex, if you wouldn't mind, just going to sewer. So sewer's $9.7 million. We raise the vast majority of those funds from our general rates, and then we have a special account that we're kind of phasing out called inflow and infiltration. So that brings us to our total revenue that comes in, but this is our sewer rates that everyone sees on their sewer bill. So, all right, Alex, you want to go back to the master balance sheet then and scroll down to the charges? So on the bottom of the master balance sheet, if we take, Alex, go to sewer, if you don't mind. So on the sewer, we're projecting $8.9 million in sewer funds. You remember we have $9.7 million in revenue coming in. So Alex, if you go to the sewer balance sheet, just go to direct charges. Yep, go down a little bit. So you'll see the total direct charges is $8.9 million, and that's what we list on the balance sheet as the total charges. And then below that, we list out what are known as indirect costs. So these are costs that are budgeted within the general operating budget. So within that $138 million for all of our utilities, that's within the Department of Public Works. So those funds, if you keep scrolling down, Alex, you'll see on the utility side includes a lot of categories. We're funding sewer workers' pensions. We're funding their amount of money that they need for their diesel and gasoline. We're covering their workers' comp. We're doing postage that they may do on the mailing of their bills. We're covering their OPEB requirements. Alex, can you just go back up? Sorry, I made you go down too quick, just a little bit. Keep going just to the top here. Okay, that's good. So then we're also carrying general financial administration costs associated with the treasurer collector, 10% of the treasurer collector's budget, who collects the revenue for this department, and the accounting oversight, general Department of Public Works administrative report support, 5% of the DPW director's salary, roughly 30% of the admin costs. So things like that, IT support that's associated with this enterprise fund. So we really try to capture the true cost of business and ensure that we raise enough revenue to cover it. All right, Alex, if you just go down to the bottom line then for the indirect. So this $736,000 plus the $8.9 million or whatever it is, roughly $9 million in direct charges is equal to the total revenue that we're bringing in. So this $736,000 is sprinkled throughout various other aspects of the operating budget, including debt service. And then the balance, the vast majority of it is a direct sewer charge. It's directly associated with our operations or capital for this project. So Alex, if you go back to the master balance sheet for me then, kind of recap this. So we have the total direct charges at the bottom of the master balance sheet. Up top, within, right there, Alex, somewhere within the total municipal operating line where DPW lies and feeds into this number, we have the indirect charges. And again, it's balanced at the top by the revenue that we raise from each one of these. So for each of these cost centers, we identify the full cost. We do our best to attribute any costs that are associated with these businesses into the rates that we raise, which means that the true cost of providing these services are raised by the rates and is incremental based on usage, so it's fair in theory. And the general tax levy is only reserved for general costs that benefit all residents, agnostic of services. So that's what we try to do every year in the overview of the budget. When we do every year, we're able to balance these and we don't intermix costs between the utilities. But I just wanted to take a couple minutes and explain that endeavor that makes these budgets balance out.
When the town itself is a customer of these services, like the sewer and the water in this building and such, how does that get factored in?
We budget for that within the Department of Public Works. So we do raise that through the tax levy. Our electricity consumption, our water consumption, our sewer consumption, we do give ourselves a discount, and we clearly show that when we set the rates. So we do have a municipal rate for all of our buildings, but we do try to cover the cost of our own services so the ratepayers aren't paying a higher utility bill. It does come in through the general tax levy, but we think that's the most transparent way. So I could tell you, Mark, under this scenario, how much we spend on water, how much we spend on sewer.
Right,
Yep.
okay. Everyone good with that? Anything else you all want to add? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, appreciate it.
I'm hoping some point before the fiscal year is out that we'll do a workshop on Selco and like services. We kept it separate from here because it really is in many ways different. But otherwise, it is just another utility. It's just that it's run by a municipally owned corporation.
Right.
But instead, but it's still utilities provided to the town. But we're not leaving it out tonight. We're just,
Yeah, so, and if I could just add, so the main reason it's not on here is because it has its own unique laws, as Mark said, and it's not subject to town meeting appropriation. All those authorities lie within the Selco Commission, so they don't have to come to town meeting for appropriation of their funds. So that makes it different than any of our other utilities. They have a lot of other more detailed general laws. It's unique. Of course, there's only 41 cities and towns that have light departments and the like, even fewer that have cable and IT, internet services. But yeah, so it's all under the authority of Selco and not subject to town meeting appropriation. Occasionally, when they do a big borrowing, they come in to leverage the town's buying power and AAA bond rating. They did with the fiber project. It saves everyone money in the end, but we bring those funds in really under this aspect of the master balance sheet. You see here light revenue and cable TV revenue. That covers their debt service obligations, so they transfer those funds that they raise through those rates over to the town to pay the debt.
okay. That actually brings up like 8 more questions in my head, but I will save it for our very exciting Selco workshop someday in the future.
Great.
Anyone else have questions on what we've covered tonight? Yeah, go ahead.
So Selco is not accountable to the town.
It is. It's not accountable to town meeting. The hierarchy is that the town manager appoints the commissioners, and the commissioners appoint the staff. So it comes under more of that executive function, but their dollars are not subject to town meeting appropriation. So that gives them a little bit more independence and flexibility to manage the electric utility.
But ultimately, they are responsible to the town manager.
Yes, yeah, and they fall under our federal ID number. All of their financials are audited by the town auditor that we hire every year, so it's all included in a single audit. But, yeah, ultimately flows through the town manager.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Questions on our utilities enterprise funds? Now, when we have the revolving funds, such as the Donahue Rowing Center and such, those are entirely separate from this. That is just an accounting mechanism
Yep,
that allows us to keep money flowing over the fiscal years.
yep. It's,
Okay,
yeah, it's a more simple version of an enterprise account. Just a little easier to manage, less dollar amounts, but it's the same concept.
okay. All right, I think that concludes our workshop for this meeting. Unless anyone has any other questions, okay. Let us review our next item on the agenda, which is the meeting schedule. In March, on the 24th and 26th, that is a Thursday night and most of the day on Saturday, we will have our budget hearings. Are those public hearings? Public is invited to participate, ask questions. It's very interesting. It's kind of the heart of our project. I really hope to see a lot of people here. The building will be open. It is already open, and it will stay open, and it's lots of, I almost said fun, but it's lots of interesting. How's that? It's lots of interesting. So that will be Thursday, March 24th, Saturday, March 26th. Anyone on the committee have any reasons to not do it on those dates? Are we good? Okay. And,
Excuse me,
yeah,
I won't be there.
neither of them, neither the Thursday nor the Saturday?
No, I won't. I'll be out of town.
Can we allow a remote participation on these kinds of meetings?
It would highly complicate the meeting if 7 or 8 of you are here and one of them isn't.
Because then everything has to be done on roll call, and we have a lot of
Yep.
ups and downs.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any trouble with those dates? I mean, we kind of have to stick with those dates because there's a cascade of process that we're kind of caught in, and everything has to work. So I'm afraid, Alan, you might have to miss this one. I actually missed my first one, my first year a few years ago. I was out of town. I guess there's really not much we can do about it. Sorry.
I think I'll survive.
Okay. Okay. We'll tell you all about it, okay?
Thank you.
You'll be on TV, so.
Yeah, it'll be on TV.
Yeah.
So the 24th is in the evening, same time, and
Same time.
26th
Is,
is most of the day.
Most of
yeah, we show up here 9 o'clock.
Mhm.
We take a break for lunch. We usually finish by like 2, 3 maybe.
So
30 here.
just a
2:33.
a couple points. So within the first few pages of your budget book, there's a schedule that we've laid out, subject to change. But we will note that Thursday starts at 6 o'clock, so we can just
Starting
get a
early.
little bit more work done that first night.
Mhm.
But then there is a schedule of
Yeah.
what we're proposing at this point.
Yeah, so we go department by department.
Department.
We go through the book. The schedule that's in your book right now should also, if I recall, have page numbers, corresponding project, at least it used to. I don't have it in front of me to see. But it's a chance. Usually the department head is here. She or he will sit with Mr. Mizikar, and they will make their presentation. We'll get to ask detailed questions to whatever extent we want. And then the public will also, whoever is in attendance, will also have a chance to ask questions. You know, why are we getting this tractor? Why are we going to be having, putting shellac on those doors, or whatever it is that you want to ask about? I don't know if people put shellac on doors, but still. But that's what it's about. We take a break for lunch, we finish up on Saturday, and good stuff, good stuff. Finances, folks. All right, and then later in March, we have another set of public hearings, and this is specifically on the annual town warrant, the warrant that we will be considering and making recommendations on, and that the town meeting will be voting on at the annual town meeting in May. But we'll be having a public hearing on every single article, and again, once again, welcoming public participation, public comment on each article. And on the 28th, which is the fourth of those meetings, the last of our public hearings on the annual town meeting warrant, that's the day we'll be voting on the warrant articles, at least if I recall, that's how we usually do it. And then we have town meeting in May. Any further questions on our schedule or the excitement of spring? All right, we'll look at correspondence. We received, it should be in the online folder, a letter to us from the Mosquito Control Project. This is their annual, I believe their annual letter saying this is what they're proposing their budget be and our participation therein. I assume that this is factored in. You've already, Mr. Misgar had notice of this, and you've already factored this into
Yes.
wherever that line item would go.
Yeah, it falls within the charges in the bottom part of the,
Charges.
it's not appropriated yet.
Pretty straightforward.
It's not charged.
There's no further business, which I believe there is no further. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Right there, and a second there, and there is no discussion, because it's not debatable. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You-